A Roman satirist named Juvenal wrote about it in 100 AD. A philosopher named Seneca warned about it in 60 AD. The Ottoman Sultan's court documented it as a primary cause of aristocratic financial ruin in the 1600s. And in 2026, the average American spends $1,616 per month on things that are not food, housing, or transportation. Restaurants, ride shares, subscription boxes, things that feel normal, feels that feel earned, things that feel like just living your life. The Romans had a name for this pattern. They studied it. They wrote books about it. They watched it destroy the middle class over 2 centuries. And there's a 3-question test that ends it permanently. That's what this video is about.
The Romans had a concept, ostentatio. It means display, exhibition, the deliberate showing of wealth, not to use it, but to be seen having it. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, one of the sharpest minds of the ancient world, wrote about it with a frustration that reads as completely modern. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Men do not care how nobly they live, but only how long, although it is within the reach of every man to live nobly, but within no man's power to live long. But more specifically, Seneca wrote about Roman men who ate simply at home and spent extravagantly at dinner parties, who wore worn tunics in private and expensive togas in public, who borrowed money to appear wealthy to people they saw twice a year. The performance of wealth at the cost of actual wealth. 2,000 years before Instagram, the Romans had already invented the problem Instagram made worse. Juvenal was angrier than Seneca, and funnier. He wrote 16 satires, long, furious, darkly comic poems about Roman life, and a remarkable percentage of them are about one thing: Romans spending money they don't have to impress people they don't like. He wrote about men who owned one good toga, their best one, and wore it to every social event, while their actual clothes were falling apart at home. He wrote about dinner parties where the host had borrowed the silverware, where the food was imported and expensive, and the host hadn't paid rent in 3 months. He wrote about men who bought seats at the theater, not because they enjoyed the theater, but because being seen at the theater is what people of a certain status did. He called these men stulti, fools, not because they were stupid, but because they were spending real money on the appearance of a life they didn't actually have. The good news is Juvenal died in approximately 130 AD. The bad news is everything he wrote is still accurate today. Let me show you the modern Roman, and you tell me if you recognize him.
Here is the modern Roman. He or she earns a reasonable income, not wealthy, not poor, somewhere in the middle. They have a car that's slightly nicer than they need because the car they drive says something about who they are. They go to restaurants that are slightly more expensive than their budget allows because the restaurants you go to say something about your taste. They wear clothes with visible logos because the brands you wear say something about your position. They upgrade their phone every 2 years, even when the old one works, because an outdated phone says something about your relationship to technology. None of these decisions were made because they genuinely wanted those specific things. They were made because of what having those things communicates to other people. Juvenal called it ostentatio. Modern economists call it conspicuous consumption. Your credit card statement calls it normal. Let me give you the actual data on this. The average American spends $1,616 per month on non-essential purchases: restaurants, ride shares, subscription boxes, entertainment. 61% of those same consumers say they feel like they don't have enough money to afford more important things or put money into savings. Read that again. The same people spending $1,616 per month on non-essentials feel like they can't afford to save. That is not a budget problem. That is a perception problem. And it is exactly, word for word, the problem Seneca was describing in 60 AD. Romans who couldn't pay rent at dinner parties with borrowed silverware. Americans who can't save, spending $1,616 a month on things that feel completely reasonable. The mechanism is identical. The scale is larger. The result is the same.
In the Ottoman Empire, particularly from the 1500s through the 1700s, the imperial court in Constantinople developed a culture of competitive display that historians have documented in extraordinary detail. Viziers, senior government officials, spent fortunes on elaborate robes, household furnishings, and public ceremonies, not because Ottoman culture required it, but because your visible wealth was your political signal. To appear less wealthy than your rank suggested was to appear weak, and weakness was dangerous. Ottoman court records document viziers who died heavily in debt despite earning salaries that should have made them wealthy, because every coin earned went into the performance of status rather than the accumulation of it. The performance consumed the substance. The Ottoman historian and court bureaucrat Mustafa Ali, writing in 1581, described this pattern with a phrase that translates roughly to, "He spent his fortune building the appearance of fortune, and found himself with only the appearance." Rome, Ottoman Empire, 2026 America. Same habit, same result, different century.
Before I give you the 3 questions, I want to explain why every other approach to this problem fails. The standard advice is make a budget, track your spending, cut back on non-essentials. And that advice fails for the same reason Roman stolti couldn't stop attending expensive dinner parties, even when they knew they couldn't afford them. Because the spending isn't about the thing, it's about the signal. You can't budget your way out of a social signaling problem, because every time you're about to make the spend, it doesn't feel like financial irresponsibility. It feels like a normal social choice. It feels like living your life. The only way out is to interrupt the decision at the moment it happens. That's what the 3 questions do. They create a gap between the impulse and the action, and in that gap, the real decision gets made. Seneca called it the pause of reason, the moment between stimulus and response. The modern version takes about 12 seconds. Before any non-essential purchase, ask yourself one question. If nobody would ever know I had this, would I still want it? Not would you enjoy it. Would you want it if it were invisible to everyone else? The restaurant meal you'd post a photo of, would you still go if you couldn't post it? The car upgrade, would you still want it if everyone drove the same car and nobody could tell them apart? The shoes with the visible logo. Same shoes without the logo, same price, same choice. If the honest answer is no, you're paying for a signal, not a thing. You're paying someone else to broadcast a message about you. That message is the most expensive thing you'll never own. The second question is harder and more useful. Who specifically am I trying to impress with this, and do they actually care? Name them.
Not people in general, specific people. Your colleagues at work? Research consistently shows that after about 72 hours, people stop noticing what you wear, what you drive, or what restaurant you went to. Your friends? The ones who actually care about you don't care about this. The ones who would judge you for not having it are not your friends. They're your audience. Juvenal made this point in 100 AD, and it's still the most uncomfortable question you can ask yourself about a purchase. Are you spending money on people or on the idea of what those people might think of you? Because the idea of what people might think, that is not a real person. You cannot impress a hypothetical. Question 3. What does this cost in time? The third question is the one that changes the math permanently. How many hours of your life did I trade for this? Take your hourly after-tax wage, your actual take-home divided by your hours worked. Now divide the price of what you're about to buy by that number. That $180 dinner, how many hours of your life is that? The $65 monthly subscription box you barely open, how many hours per year? The $40,000 car when a $25,000 car does everything you need, how many months of your life? Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." Money is just stored time. When you spend money on ostentatio, you are spending time on the opinions of people who won't remember it in a week. 3 questions, 12 seconds, applied before every non-essential purchase. The Romans identified the problem 2,000 years ago. The solution was in the same texts. Nobody told you. Now you know.
Juvenal died around 130 AD. He never saw the Western Roman Empire fall. That happened 350 years after he wrote his last satire. But he watched the Roman middle class, the people who built the most sophisticated civilization in the ancient world, slowly hollow themselves out, spending on appearances, borrowing for status, performing wealth while losing it. He wrote about it because he was angry, and because he thought if he named it clearly enough, people would stop doing it. They didn't. But you can. 3 questions, every non-essential purchase, starting today. Who is this for? Who am I trying to impress? What does this cost in time? Seneca had a phrase for the moment someone decides to stop performing and start building. Recede inte ipse. Retreat into yourself. Come home to what you actually want, not what you want to be seen wanting. Next week, what happens when you redirect that $1,616 per month, the investment framework the Medici used to build the most powerful bank in Europe, translated for someone starting with $500 in 2026?